Turn my microphone on. Is my microphone on? I do that a lot because I've been listening to music through my speakers, and then I put on. Ooh, I can't actually see with my. I am farsighted, which means that when things are far away, like y'all are right now, I can't wear my glasses. And when I need to read something close, I need to wear my glasses. So anyway, I was realizing I couldn't really focus on what was going on, which was kind of a bummer. Anyway, we're going to do another live recording of the podcast. I'm making sure my mic's working. It is working. It's kind of got a buzz. Just changing some settings here. Okay, I'm gonna. Today is Friday, so it's a Thought of the Walk episode. I'm going to get things going. We have achieved greatness at this channel here. Yesterday, we invited trolls. Apparently, we got enough attention that trolls noticed us, and after doing a little looking into it, because I figure I'm a little channel. Why would trolls come? What I've found out is that unless I have a second person managing the comment feed, it's kind of hard to just delete them, and I can't just ban certain users, or at least if I can, I couldn't find a way to. So if that happens, guys, just ignore them. Do not respond. I will not respond, and the one thing I might do is pause the podcast recording and delete things. But if you ignore trolls and don't give them attention, they go away. And YouTube is full of trolls apparently. So whatever. It's like a benchmark unlocked. Isn't that awesome? Okay, so today we're just going to do a live recording of the podcast, and I'm going to jump right on into this one. So let's get going. Well, welcome everyone to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you want to live on your terms so that you don't have to be in that situation where you feel like you're having your life lived for you. Today is Friday, May 15, 2020. It is the day that my $1,200 stimulus check is being mailed by the IRS. Why is it being mailed? Hell if I know. I gave them my bank account. Anyway, I did. I looked on the status thing because I was like, I wonder if I'm going to get one of those someday. And it never came through yet. And then they were like, hey, we're mailing yours Friday. And I thought, well, okay, whatever. I mean, yeah, we're not going to go down that path, but it is Friday. So it's a Thought of the Walk day. And sometimes I go on a walk. I usually bring my dogs with me, except for I have one with a cut pad. So she's kind of on house arrest at this point. But I go on a walk, and I usually it clears my mind, and I'll have a really clear thought. And then sometimes I bring those to the show. So about every other Friday, we do a Thought of the Walk episode. It's often on a liberty topic, but not always. It could just be a unique observation about human nature. And originally, I thought today was going to be, it's not about the mask. Don't make it about the mask, because it's people like, I never knew people could get so upset about something that covers your face. But I guess I should have known that based on some of the reactions to burqas around here. But as I got to thinking, I kind of heard a conversation and a story about a neighbor tattling on another neighbor and what happened as a result of that. And I'm going to pause right now. Okay, guys, here's what just happened. I just started hearing myself talking in my head. The reason I heard myself talking in my head is that I used an audio template that I thought I had deleted everything out of, and I hadn't. So then Nicole started talking while Nicole was talking. That's very confusing when that happens. So, as I said, if you watch the live recording of the podcast, you see what really happens. Now I have to go back and listen to what in the world what was I even talking about? Heard a conversation and a story about a neighbor. I think that's about where I'm going to start. Yep, that's where I'm going to start. So I listen to what I'm saying. I try to match the tone as best I can. I'm sure y'all can tell when I splice in and splice out. But yeah. So we're just going to go edit split regions at Playhead. Hey, I said split regions at Playhead. And then we delete. Boop. Okay. You ready? We're going to jump back into this whole thing. about a neighbor tattling on another neighbor, and I thought, well, that's actually a better topic than talking about stupid masks anyway. So today I'm going to give you my thoughts on tattling, and they do kind of relate back to the mask and people's reactions to masks because it's just absurd how much people react to masks these days. Also, if you want to send feedback or comments or stump the sauce questions, you can do it. Just email me, Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com, or go to livingfreeintennessee.com. Click on contact and fill out the form. Those come straight to me. I have a bit of a backlog of those from last week because I've been really, really concentrating on making sure that my tasks are done every day. And so I've kind of turned off Zello a lot, and I've turned off all communications, and I haven't been on social as much. And then that means that, communications are infringed. And then I haven't been going through my email. I'm trying to do it in blocks of time. I'm starting a new management system. So if you've sent something in that's urgent and haven't heard from me, it's okay to send it again. But I am going to be going through email later this afternoon. Anyway, with that, I do have the first segment before the thought of the walk, and it's Stump the Sauce. This one comes in from Carrie. And Carrie asks, well, actually, Carrie says, so I have a strawberry patch. Lucky you, Carrie. I don't. I have 3 strawberry plants that survived of the 40 that I put in. Anyway, I have a strawberry patch in a raised bed, approximately 4 feet by 5 feet. They are producing right now, but it's a battle to get to the berries before the snails and slugs have their feast. It's also a pain in the rear end to harvest. I don't know why it's a pain in the rear end to harvest, but okay. I'd like to move them into some kind of planter system for easier harvest and less snail access. What's the best time to transplant? Should I set up the planter and just transplant the runners or the parent plants as well? Okay, so I'm gonna handle 2 things here. 1, this year's battle against your slugs and your snails starts with one thing, and that's getting them drunk. What you need to do is put out, like, what I used to use were tuna fish cans, and I bury them so they were kind of level with the soil, and you put beer in them. Snails and slugs love the beer, and then they fall in the beer and have a wonderful drunken pass from this world into the next. Okay. So, first of all, I would concentrate on getting those things drunk so they're not just getting your strawberries. Make sure it really is the slugs and snails, but I'm sure it is. I have little slugs on my my lettuce outside, and I need to figure out how to get them drunk. And then 2, as far as transplanting, I'm not a strawberry expert, but I know that in Tennessee, we're about to go from not very hot to really, really hot without much warning. And personally, I do not like to transplant things that are established if I can avoid it right now or 2 weeks from now, because then they have to be cared for and watered. So if you are ready to transplant now and you want to, what you need to do is build in time and attention to be able to take care of the plants for the rest of the summer. And then they will go into their normal dormancy as winter comes on, and then they'll come back. As far as should you transplant the actual plants versus the runners, I don't know. I'm going to have to ask Nick Ferguson. This is what I do know. I would transplant both personally, but my dad oversaw some farms growing strawberries for a large company, and they were growing them in China, and he would go out there and they would send the crowns and say, grow these crowns. And then they had rules for how to make the crowns for the next year. And they would take the runners and plant the runners, and the runners produced less. So I don't know if that matters on the home scale, but I do know, like, that one little piece of information. Strawberries really aren't where I'm an expert. I am growing strawberries for like, I grew some last year and got like 2 berries, and the chickens actually got those before I did. And that was because a good friend of mine, Redleg A1, dropped off the plants at the spring workshop, and I still have some of those plants. But this year, I'm actually doing my first year of growing strawberries, and I have a lot of them in my hydroponic system. I planted a bunch of them on the hillside, and this particular spring didn't work well for that, or maybe I didn't treat them right. I don't know. All I know is I have 3 little plants that made it. And then I have 2 little plants from last year. So, the hydro plants are doing great and they're blooming and the slugs aren't getting them. So, I don't know if that helps. I will reach out to Nick or to some other people, or guys, if you're listening going, "I know the answer to this," let me know so I can loop Carrie in on an answer. I think he actually managed to stump the sauce. Good job. With that, it's time for the main topic of today's show, and that is a thought of the walk on tattlers. So think about this. Were you that little kid back in school who ran to the teacher to tell them of every stray look, nose picking, or minor transgression made by a classmate that you found annoying? Were you that kid? Or was that kid in your class? Or is it the combination? Like sometimes you did that because you knew you could, and sometimes you were like, well, that's annoying. That's a tattler over there. And did your teacher ever get so vexed with the constant tattling that he or she asked you to stop it? Like you got in trouble instead of the kid doing the transaction or the transgression. Sorry, not transaction. Um, if you are as old as I am, and I'm in my mid to late 40s now, you grew up with a culture in public schools that tattling was bad and that calling in authority for every single minor transgression was not good. And that culture, I think when you're raised that way, emulates into your older years. But with the addition of zero tolerance, NIMBY politics, and the concept that other people need to bow to your personal language choices, to your allergy problems, to make you comfortable at their expense, tattling has become a cultural norm in some places. Yeah. And for somebody my age, I'm like, why are we supporting the tattler side of this? Is it because they're loud? Because, they're wrong, right? So this morning I read a story on our MeWe chat group, and it was the tale of two neighbors. One neighbor reported the other neighbor to the officials for raising chickens that were not registered. Apparently, in their state, you're supposed to raise, if you raise like 10 birds for eggs, you're supposed to pay 5 cents per bird and register them. By the way, that's 50 cents. You have to go fill out a flippin' form and take some bureaucrat's time to pay the $50 or the 50-cent registration fee for your chickens. Nobody even knew that existed. Nobody knew that existed until one neighbor tattled on the other neighbor for having chickens because for some reason, having chickens that are not registered is against the rule, but it's totally okay if you pay the 50 cents. Totally okay. And I think the thing that people don't realize is that if you're like me and you're a pacifist, and the very act of tattling is an act of violence. So if you're a pacifist, tattling doesn't fit in your life. It does not fit. It's violent. You are being violent against somebody else. It should be treated with the same reaction when you see somebody do it to somebody else as if they walked up and one neighbor went up to the other neighbor and went pow and punched him in the nose, right? It's that violent. Wait, what's that you say? No way. How can it be violent? I'm just telling people, I mean, they're supposed to register the chickens for 50 cents for 10 chickens, right? How can reporting somebody for breaking the law be an act of violence? Well, it is. It is definitely that was an act of violence. That thing that the one neighbor did to the other neighbor was an act of violence. When you report someone to an authority, and I use that word lightly, but when you report somebody to an authority and that authority takes action, and if the person resists the action being taken, what happens to the person? Does the authority say, well, you owe 50 cents and I'm going to just keep mailing you letters? No, no. The fines go up for not paying and not registering. Eventually, they get so big that the person gets possibly incarcerated for having 10 chickens. They might even lose their home from fines. That's violence right there. You're taking their property because they have 10 chickens or long grass or the wrong kind of shrubbery or they painted their house the wrong color or they wore a mask or they didn't wear a mask. I don't know. That's tattling. That's violence. Tattling is violence. So you may be thinking this is an overreaction, but how many of us have heard the story about, and I don't have all the facts on this probably. There's the 80-year-old man in New York who lived in a, semi-rural setting, but in a town. Had to leave town because a friend of his got sick. While he was away, the yard service stopped coming. He didn't really know about it. Grass got long, got home, lawnmower didn't work, got sick, went to the hospital, still hadn't cut the grass. And he got city fines. And the fines were so large that they were going to take his house. So because an 80-year-old man had a sick friend and then ended up sick himself and couldn't mow his grass, he got doubled down on by officials after he went to them and was like, "Hey, this is absurd." And instead of helping the 80-year-old man, they doubled down and tried to take his house for having long grass. How was long grass actually hurting anybody else? How was it hurting anybody else? That, my friends, is violence. That tattling, whoever reported his long grass, whether it was an official driving by or another neighbor who could have just gotten their own flipping lawnmower out and helped an 80-year-old man out, right? If somebody who had a lawnmower reported that guy, that's just absurd. That's violence. And that neighbor reporting chickens that resulted in a bill against the other neighbor that they've never should have had to pay. Because, like, really, what about raising chickens should require a 5 cent per bird fee for what? For nothing. It's not like the 5 cents is going to help raise the bird. It's not keeping them safe. It's not eliminating disease. It's not helping you get them to the processor. And if you sell them, you certainly get hit with income tax or sales tax, depending on the state you're in. So why 5 cents and why chickens? I don't know. That's a question you should ask before tattling on your neighbor about having chickens that results in a 50-cent bill, right? And a whole bunch of their time wasted. It's violence. And that brings me to my next point. Why should we vehemently oppose tattling? Why should we make sure our children understand what it is and why it's wrong? Because by leaning on the concept of tattling, you can equip your children to do something really, really, really important their whole life long. They end up with the tools they will need in the future to stand up against real tyranny, to stand up for the people who need it, and to stand up for themselves when they need it. And this starts with knowing right from wrong morally and separating it from the rule makers. The rule makers will always make little rules, and those little rules will sometimes make sense and sometimes not make any sense at all, right? And if you don't learn to stand up against the rule makers or figure out ways around the rules, you just buy into the socially furthered, mesmerizing, controlling world that they're putting into place, where their rules supersede morality. And at first it doesn't. At first they're moral rules, right? And then they push the envelope. They're not doing that intentionally. They're doing it because they now see whatever they're making a rule about as moral. Like charging 5 cents a chicken. Maybe if you start charging 5 cents a chicken to somebody who runs 3 or 400,000 chickens, it starts being a certain amount of money that makes a difference. I don't know why, but for whatever. Maybe it limits how many chickens they have. I don't know. Like, that rule just doesn't make any sense to me at all. But it makes sense to the person making the rule. It's kind of like when you go to fill out a form, and every time I fill out a government form, there's always some question in language that makes no bloody sense to me and I call and I'll be like, "What am I supposed to put here?" And they'll be like, "Duh, it's blah, 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 blah." I'm like, "Okay, slow down a little bit. I'm afraid I don't understand. I'm not meaning to be dense here, but can you help me out?" And eventually they'll help me out. I remember I had an hour-long conversation with some lady in the state of Tennessee about the form you fill out to pay real property tax, which is if you own a business in Tennessee, They charge you property tax on your cell phone, on your pad of paper, on this pen, on this charger. My glasses count if they're on my desk. The pictures, the instruments I have hanging behind me, they might count because they're decorations. Okay? You pay tax on all of that because it's real property. Yeah, that rule doesn't make sense to me at all. So then I'm trying to fill out the form and can't figure out how. I'm like, do I literally have to tell you how many pieces of paper are in my office? Because I don't know. It's different every day. Or do I just, and she's like, well, you can group all your kitchen stuff into this one category and just make the best guess about what it's worth. And then we'll do an assessment and then we'll give you it. Yeah, I don't know. I think when we equip people to know what's morally right and morally wrong, and they separate it from those rule makers, because that person I'm talking to was a rule maker, you're in a much better position your whole life long to stand up when the time comes to stand up. There were a lot of rule followers following rules made by the rule makers in Nazi Germany as the Nazis were coming into power. And as far as I can tell, there are a lot of rule followers here, and that's dangerous. I've heard people say things like, when pot is legal, I can finally use it. As if it magically becomes safe because it's legal. And right now, when it's illegal, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. Some of these people actually have thought about it and they're like, the consequences of breaking that particular law, don't want to do it. But some people actually say, as justification why somebody who's dying of cancer shouldn't be able to smoke pot, it's illegal. It's illegal. Yeah, it's illegal to have chickens in whatever state that is without paying 5 cents a bird. Does that make any sense? I don't know. They somehow think that the law will magically change it from safe or unsafe to safe when it becomes legally. Just like the FDA not approving hydrochloroquine as a treatment for COVID somehow makes it unsafe, even though the exact same dosages are using to treat lupus, which is then safe in that case, right? Uh, it makes me speechless. I'm like, well, I mean, I don't know the science behind it, so I'm not going to take a stand. But how does the drug become suddenly more unsafe if you're using it for one thing versus another? I don't get it. They're not thinking logically and they're not thinking morally. So, what is tattling, and how is it different from the need to intervene through reporting an actual transgression that's like not an act of violence to report it or to report on it? I mean, if I see my neighbor steal my neighbor's boat off of their land, I should probably report what I saw, right? Is that tattling? I don't think that's actually tattling. It's kind of like the difference between tattling and narking in some ways. I mean, why though? What about it is not? And I think that reporting somebody's chickens, reporting somebody for smoking a little weed, reporting somebody for wearing a mask, or reporting somebody for not wearing a rat mask, or reporting somebody for going the right way or the wrong way down the aisle at your grocery store, that's all tattling. That's all tattling. And it's very different than reporting somebody for stealing a car, for breaking into a house and punching somebody in the nose or beating them till they're almost dead. And I think for me, the difference between tattling and not tattling is it boils down to violence. Tattling is violence, right? Because you're reporting something that's not violent and bringing violence down on that person. So the question you need to ask yourself is the person perpetrating violence on another? If so, are they hurting that person against their will? And if so, do they need me to intervene? Or are they already taking actions they need to take and maybe I just need to be a witness or whatever, right? It If there's no violence or the violence, whatever, I mean, it's kind of a weird way to think about it, but the violence is invited. People have different desires. Um, then it's not worth tattling about. If the transgression's not hurting anyone, like if their grass is too tall, if they're raising chickens on their own land, then you are tattling when you tell on them and cede the intervention to remedy whatever problem you see to an authority rather than knocking on the door and saying, "Actually, your chickens stink. Can we do something about that?" That's a much different thing to address than your chickens aren't registered at 5 cents a bird, and I don't like how they look on your land. Um, None of your business. And if somebody wearing or not wearing a mask ticks you off, it's just hurting your feelings. And that doesn't merit perpetrating violence on somebody, shooting somebody over, bringing the authorities down to shoot them for you. Does not merit it because your feelings are hurt. It's all tattling. So what's not tattling? Not helping a child when they are being beaten. Not getting involved when someone is targeted for theft or violence. That's not tattling if you're trying to get involved to help. And you know for darn sure that child's being beaten. And I can tell you this, I faced that issue of child abuse here, where I had to decide, do I get involved personally? Do I call CPS? Well, CPS is inviting violence into the house because they will take the children and God knows where those children will end up, right? And I had not personally witnessed any events, so I did not call CPS, even though I'm pretty sure some stuff was going on. Because then it would be tattling, and what if I was wrong, right? What if we make everybody's life worse because we tattle? Not standing against rulemaking officials when they impart violence on people who have basically just living their lives is wrong. Reporting people to officials when you haven't actually seen what's going on is wrong. And someday you may be 80 years old, unable to cut your grass, and in the hospital. And you really need your neighbors not to be tattling on you. You need the kind of neighbors who will just cut your darn grass, for God's sake. Yeah, tattling's wrong. And a really good way to tell if you should be tattling or not is these words. It's illegal. In other words, if you hear yourself thinking or saying or explaining or justifying why something needs to change or why somebody needs to stop doing something or why they can't do something, and you say, well, it's illegal, and you're not actually appealing to the reason why, the moral reason why it's wrong or it's violence against somebody else, it's probably tattling. I hate to say it. No, I don't. It's probably tattling if you're justifying it by saying it's illegal. If you can't refute a good counter argument to something, and so then you appeal to authority, like some person who's smarter says it's not okay, or you say, well, because it's illegal. Yeah, it's time to look the other way, man, because tattling is violence. If you like the show and want to support the work I do, you can do it in two ways. One, get your freshly roasted to order coffee at hollowroast.com. Two, go to livingfreeintennessee.com, click on membership, and sign up to become a member. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week. That moment when you're worried that maybe it didn't record. Okay, guys, thanks for tuning in. I just totally knocked my journal off of my desk. Anyway, luckily we didn't get the trolls. Thanks for your comments, Josh, and I will see you all next week. Have a great weekend.